cases continuing to spike in the United States, the European Union reportedly will ban most U.S. travelers from entering the region when it reopens. An official told the New York Times the list was made judging a mix of scientific criteria and all of that, so the list could update every 2 weeks.
Joining us now via Skype is the international president of the Association of Flight Attendants, Sara Nelson, with her perspective on this.
Good to see you, Sara.
Good to see you.
Absolutely. So, Sara, we wanted to get your reaction to that news, and also, I believe American Airlines announced that in the coming months they will no longer keep middle seats empty on these passenger planes, possibly putting more people at risk of the coronavirus. And just wanted to give you a response, an ability to respond to that and advocate on behalf of your workers.
Sure. Thanks so much. So, first of all, this announcement by the EU is something that we have been warning about for several months now. If the United States does not attack the actual problem, the virus, then we're not going to limit the spread. We're not going to contain the spread. And we are opening ourselves up to criticism from the rest of the world, where decisive actions have been taken to limit the spread and to address their economy in a meaningful way. And they are not going to allow us to travel there as long as this is a hotspot. Let's be really clear. They're not going to come here either. So we're going to lose out on all that tourism too. We need to address the virus first, but I'm telling you, this is devastating, this news from the European Union, because it's not just about the network flights that fly to Europe. This is about our standing in the world. And U.S. aviation has been known to lead the world on safety standards, on competence, on honesty and governance of aviation. And because of that, we have had access to the rest of the world. We've had access to the rest of the world through open skies agreements. We've had access to the rest of the world with landing rights. We have been able to put this reputation that we have into trade agreements and have access to anywhere that we want to fly. And so this is going to have long-term hurt, not only immediate hurt, but long-term hurt to America's brand.
What's your take on the American Airlines announcement that they're going to start allowing middle seats to be occupied? I'm curious what the divisions are kind of within your rank and file, and if there's a prevailing opinion one way or another on that question.
So here's the issue. Blocking middle seats is really more of a marketing ploy than any kind of social distancing policy. Let's be really clear. Blocking middle seats does not keep people 6 feet apart.
Right.
So there's no way to properly socially distance on a plane. What we were supposed to be doing during this time, and what we've been calling for since the beginning of January, is a coordinated government response to the coronavirus in aviation. So since there's no way to properly socially distance, we need to have healthcare authorities give us the best advice on the layers of safety and health policies that we can put in place to limit the potential risk of spread in aviation. So a big issue is wearing those masks. The airlines have put that policy in place based on our advocacy, and also recognizing that if people don't have confidence in the safety of aviation, they are not going to buy tickets. We're just back at 20% bookings of what we were a year ago. So you've got to have those mask policies. We've also said that with unemployment at record levels, we could be putting in place a healthcare force at our airports, much like the TSA, at the front of the airports, so that you're doing a self-assessment on health with people. You're asking them basic questions, just like you might in security. Did you pack your bag yourself? Has it been in your control all the time? We have a model that works for this. And you can ask people health questions to do that self-assessment so that it's also not an invasion of their privacy. And then you can also check to make sure that they know how to wear the mask, and help them understand that this is a policy that's required and backed up by federal regulations. None of that is taking place right now. What the airlines have done is they've had these mask policies. They have improved their cleaning procedures. Our airplanes are cleaner than they've ever been. They're using the HEPA filters for air filtration. They are doing single point of service. So flight attendants only have to hand out a bag with snacks and drinks inside, and then pick that up again. So we've got less contact with the passengers. Some of the airlines are loading back to front. So there's some hodgepodge policies happening across the airlines all over the place. But what should be happening here, and the reason that the European Union is not going to allow us to travel there, is because there is no recognition from this government that this is an actual threat. There's no attempt to put together a coordinated plan, and flight attendants are left on the front lines to enforce policies from the airlines like mask policies, where some of our passengers have been told to believe that this is a political statement wearing a mask rather than a public health necessity.
And then the other thing that Ryan actually flagged for me, I wasn't aware of this, is that you've been outspoken about the unions, but within the AFL-CIO, and police brutality, and about the police unions in particular. As a union leader yourself, how are you thinking about police unions in the context of everything that's happening right now in our current political moment?
Well, I know how important collective bargaining is, and I know that unions play a really important part in public safety because workers can speak out. We have whistleblower protections. We have unions to back us up on those whistleblower protections so that an individual employee doesn't have to represent themselves only. We can call out these issues and demand of government, of management, and of ourselves the best possible standards. We have said that this is a time to make it very clear to police unions that we have a demand for real change. And we need to see that there is an attempt to address the racial bias that is pervasive within those organizations. I think that also, just as a general rule, we say an injury to one is an injury to all. And any system that is set up to be on the side of the oppressor and keep workers down is not supportive of true collective bargaining that supports worker power and emboldening workers and empowering workers to take ownership of their own space and freedom. So we passed a resolution that says that we need to be making these demands of police unions. I want to be really clear that most police unions are not actually affiliated with the larger labor movement. But this is really a time to demand change. And that's what we should be doing as a labor movement. And what we should be making very clear as a labor movement is that collective bargaining is never used as a tool to oppress people.
Just strategically speaking, if you think back about 20 years or so to when the war on teachers' unions was really launched, I remember that the most effective kind of rhetorical and political device that those assailants had was these terrible teachers. You know, they would find these examples of these awful teachers who passed out drunk in the classroom and were put famously in these kind of rubber rooms, and the New York system was a place that the media loved to find these kinds of cases, and the union would then fight for those particular teachers to maintain their jobs despite all of what seemingly obviously seemed to be the reason that the teachers shouldn't be there. And so you understood why the union was doing that, because they're supposed to defend everybody, but you also saw that those people were being cynically weaponized by anti-union forces. Now, it's not that there's anything cynical going on about the way that police unions are being challenged, but shouldn't they look back at the experience with the teachers and recognize that if we try to defend every single one of these officers who is clearly guilty of grave misconduct as a danger to the public, they're also undermining all public sector unions and the idea of collective bargaining. Are you sensing a dawning of that among union officials? Or are they just going to just dig in until the end on this?
So if you look at the teacher union example, the teacher unions actually did a self-assessment and really worked on addressing those issues within collective bargaining and making sure that due process was not a stop on addressing bad behavior, but actually encouraging, making management have to go through the process so that people have a fair shake and have a fair trial. When you have a process that doesn't provide really for a means to have that fair trial, I think that's what we're talking about here. Mm-hmm. And we're talking about a system that enables oppression. And so it's not really collective bargaining, and that's what we have to be really clear about. And if we're not addressing this, my concern is that what's going to happen is exactly what you're talking about. This is going to be used as an example of why collective bargaining doesn't work. And in fact, actually, it's turning collective bargaining on its head. And so if we're not really transparent about this and open to this discussion and helping people understand what collective bargaining is, this is a time when people are saying we need unions. Unions are polling higher than ever before. And there's examples of millennials out in tech in the Pacific Northwest these young workers who went and knocked on their neighbor's door because they heard they were a union organizer and actually did a house call to the union organizer to say, can you tell me about a union? I don't know what this is, but I don't like what's happening in my workplace and I want to do something about it. And I hear you might have an idea about what we can do. So we have a real opportunity here to talk about how unions are a place of building worker power. And any system that is used to isolate people, to oppress people, to do what the corporate elite wants to do to hold people accountable for being poor, to keep people from working with each other and keep people at odds with each other and define people as the criminals in this society, where the corporate elite is really creating this situation where you're putting people into spaces where they have no choice but to try to find another way to take care of themselves. And what we really need to be talking about here is redefining the entire system. And this is a moment to do that. If the labor movement is engaged in this conversation, we can really talk about who needs to be held accountable right now, how our laws are working, how we're funding programs that help lift people up rather than oppress people. And this is a moment to do that. It's not just about those individual police officers. It's about the entire system itself. Are we funding our schools or are we funding our jails? Are we chasing homeless people from place to place so they can't even sleep, or are we providing homes for everyone? How are we going to respond in this moment? And it's about oppression. It's about racism. It's about systemic racism that exists, and some people who have their lives on the line just because of the color of their skin. But it's a bigger problem than that too, and it's a broader problem of oppression and trying to keep the masses in their places and divided from each other, rather than coming together and making this a space where we can all benefit.
Well, we really appreciate you coming on, Sarah. Very much appreciate your insight on all this. Thank you.
Thank you. And we need an extension on the payroll support system that is going to fall off this fall. So the aviation payroll support is necessary in order for us to be able to address the safety issues, because you see financial and safety colliding here. And it's through no fault of their own, these workers who are going to be furloughed if we don't have a continued infusion to keep people connected to their paychecks, connected to healthcare, as long as healthcare is a for-profit employer-based system. So thanks for letting me get that in as well.
You're very welcome. There's the plug. Thanks, Sarah. Appreciate it.
All right. Take care. Bye.
Next on Rising, the Trump administration decided to go after a familiar target in the Supreme Court, Obamacare. We're going to discuss whether that's a wise decision right now when Rising continues.